pig. You've got to make a distinction. And the people are going to have to attack the pigs. The people are going to have to stand up against the pigs. That's what the Panthers are doing. That's what the Panthers are doing all over the world.
And the injustice that has been inflicted upon Negroes in this country by Uncle Sam is criminal. Don't blame a cracker in Georgia for your injustices. The government is responsible for the injustices. The government can bring these injustices to halt.
Stop and frisk is a law enforcement practice allowing police officers to briefly detain, question, and if deemed necessary, frisk individuals they suspect may be involved in criminal activity. Known formally as a Terry stop, the practice originates from the landmark U.S. Supreme Court case Terry v. Ohio 1968. This ruling established the constitutionality of the stop and frisk approach under certain conditions, shaping the way police officers engage with suspects based on reasonable suspicion rather than probable cause. Stop officers are legally permitted to stop an individual if they have a reasonable suspicion based on specific, articulable facts that the person is involved in, has been involved in, or is about to engage in criminal activity. Unlike probable cause, reasonable suspicion is a lower standard, meaning officers do not need as much evidence to initiate a stop. The reasonable suspicion standard aims to allow officers to act swiftly to address potential criminal conduct while maintaining a balance with individual rights. Frisk: if, during the stop, an officer reasonably believes that the person poses a threat to their safety or to others, they may conduct a limited pat-down search, also known as a frisk. This frisk is intended solely to check for weapons, not to find evidence of other crimes. The purpose is to protect officers from harm, particularly in potentially dangerous situations, by ensuring that the person stopped is unarmed. Importantly, any evidence of illegal activity found during a legitimate frisk may be used in subsequent legal proceedings, but officers cannot frisk solely to search for evidence.
Yeah, someone just tried to break into my car, and when I confronted them, they ran away. Okay, police are on the way. Thank you.
Are you missing anything from the vehicle?
I haven't been able to check yet, but he was trying my doorknob, and luckily I locked my car, so.
What did he look like?
He was a white male, appeared to have a beard, was wearing a dark sweatshirt and jeans is all I saw, and I think he was wearing a hat.
Would you be able to recognize him again if you saw him?
Yes.
Adam 2, I believe I see my suspect sitting on a bench. Oh, I just got a photo. And that is him. I have probable cause to arrest him. The parking lot over here behind us.
Yeah, it was earlier. I just walked through it though.
Sir, we have a picture of you trying to break into a vehicle. We've identified as you, so you were under arrest. Please put your hands behind your back.
Okay.
The legal framework for stop and frisk practices is built on several Supreme Court cases, each refining the guidelines and limitations for police officers in their interactions with individuals on the street.
Men in blue stopping young men of color.
Why am I being frisked?
As tensions rise.
What's going on? I didn't do anything wrong.
In this case, a robbery suspect is cuffed.
Listen to me, you're not free to leave. Just stay here. Turn around. What am I being arrested for? I didn't do anything wrong.
The others released, and the cops managed to keep it by the book.
I don't get it.
I understand you're upset, but I'm sorry for the inconvenience.
But this scene is just pretend.
Key ruling: the Supreme Court established that police can stop and frisk an individual based on reasonable suspicion, a standard lower than probable cause. The court ruled that an officer could briefly detain a person if they had specific and articulable facts suggesting potential criminal activity, thereby allowing for a limited stop when an officer's suspicions were reasonable and objective. Outcome: the decision allowed officers a degree of latitude to ensure public safety while respecting personal privacy. This ruling represents a compromise between effective policing and the protection of Fourth Amendment rights, stipulating that such stops must be based on an officer's observation of behaviors that could reasonably indicate criminal activity. Key ruling expanding on Terry: this case clarified the limits of reasonable suspicion. The court held that merely observing a person associating with known criminals or suspected offenders was not sufficient grounds for reasonable suspicion. Police need specific evidence beyond mere association to justify a stop. emphasizing the need for objective justification and preventing assumptions based solely on interactions. Outcomes Cebron reinforced the requirement for officers to rely on direct observations of suspicious behavior, ensuring that the standard of reasonable suspicion is not diluted. Key ruling this case addressed the relevance of location and behavior in determining reasonable suspicion. The court ruled that unprovoked flight in a high crime area could be deemed suspicious and, therefore, justify a stop. The ruling acknowledged that an individual's surroundings and conduct could contribute to an officer's assessment of reasonable suspicion, particularly if the individual's response to police presence is sudden or evasive. Outcome, this decision allowed officers to consider the context such as high crime areas and the individual's reaction, including flight, when forming a reasonable suspicion, giving police additional discretion in specific scenarios. Key ruling in this case, the Supreme Court ruled that an anonymous tip alone is not enough to justify a stop and frisk. The court emphasized that such tips, without additional corroborating evidence or suspicious behavior observed by officers, do not meet the standard for reasonable suspicion. Outcome, this ruling highlighted the limitations of reliance on anonymous information, underscoring the need for officers to independently verify suspicious behavior before initiating a stop. It reinforced that reasonable suspicion must be based on objective factors rather than unverified tips. Key ruling in a federal case, the district court found that the New York Police Department's NYPD stop and frisk practices disproportionately targeted minority communities, particularly Black and Latino individuals, and violated the 4th and 14th Amendments. The court criticized the practice for its lack of oversight and discriminatory impact. Outcome, the court ordered significant reforms, including improved data collection, monitoring, and training for officers to ensure that stops complied with constitutional standards. This case highlighted the civil rights concerns associated with the practice, emphasizing the need for accountability in police procedures.
We have done exactly what the courts allow and the Constitution allow us to do, and we will continue to do everything we can to keep this city safe. I worry for my kids and I worry for your kids. I worry for you and I worry for me. Crime can come back anytime the criminals think that they're going to get away with things. Just cannot let that happen.
We do not engage in racial profiling. It is prohibited by law. It is prohibited by our own regulations. We train our officers that they need reasonable suspicion to make a stop. And I can assure you that race is never a reason to conduct a stop.
The Terry standard of reasonable suspicion grants officers discretion in conducting stops, making the practice both an asset and a challenge for law enforcement. While stop and frisk can be an effective tool in deterring crime, its implementation has sparked extensive controversy, especially over potential misuse and civil rights implications. The 4th Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, requiring a balance between personal privacy and public safety. Stop and frisk practices can border on infringing individuals' rights, especially if stops are conducted without sufficient grounds or disproportionately target certain communities. Courts remain vigilant in addressing complaints of unreasonable stops that could undermine 4th Amendment protections. Stop and frisk policies have faced significant criticism for disproportionately affecting minority groups, particularly Black and Latino communities in urban areas. Critics argue that the practice can lead to racial profiling and unfair treatment, raising serious questions about equal protection under the 14th Amendment. Cases like Floyd v. City of New York underscore the need for reform and oversight to ensure fair and unbiased implementation.
Thankful for the people that believed in us, that we weren't making up these stories, we didn't fabricate anything. We came to the table and said this is our experiences, and we're speaking for millions of other people that are going through the same thing in this city.
When I got the call this morning, the first thing I did was cry. And it wasn't because I was sad or necessarily happy, but because it was so I put everything to, it's important, and to know that it was recognized as just hard to explain.
While proponents argue that stop and frisk can deter crime and enhance community safety, studies have shown mixed results regarding its effectiveness in crime reduction. Moreover, widespread or indiscriminate use of the tactic can harm police-community relations, causing distrust among populations frequently subjected to these stops. Balancing effective policing with the need for fair treatment remains a central challenge in the application of stop and frisk. The evolution of stop and frisk practices through cases like Sebron and Wardlow reflects judicial efforts to maintain limitations on the practice, ensuring that officers rely on verifiable suspicions rather than subjective assumptions. As legal challenges arise, courts continue to refine the criteria for reasonable suspicion, aiming to prevent abuses while allowing police to act on legitimate safety concerns. In conclusion, stop and frisk remains a critical yet controversial tool in U.S. law enforcement. Established under Terry v. Ohio, this practice has evolved through subsequent cases that set boundaries to safeguard constitutional rights. While it can enhance public safety, its misuse and potential for racial bias demand vigilant oversight, training, and judicial guidance. The ongoing debate around stop and frisk reflects society's broader struggle to balance effective policing with the protection of individual freedoms and civil rights. Murder is the unlawful killing of a person with malice aforethought, meaning there was intent or reckless disregard for life. This separates murder from other types of homicide due to its intent or extreme carelessness. First-degree murder, this is an intentional and premeditated killing. The perpetrator planned the act, showing a clear intention to cause death. Premeditation could involve lying in wait or other forms of preparation. Second-degree murder, this charge applies when a killing is intentional but lacks the premeditation of first-degree murder. It includes situations where the perpetrator meant to kill but acted impulsively. It also covers cases of extreme recklessness where the person's actions showed clear disregard for life, like firing into a crowd. Felony murder, this occurs when someone is killed during the commission of a dangerous felony, such as robbery. Even without direct intent to kill, if a death occurs during certain felonies, the offender may be charged with murder due to the high-risk nature of the crime. Punishments for murder vary by jurisdiction. First-degree murder typically carries the heaviest penalties, such as life imprisonment or, in some states, the death penalty. Second-degree murder also results in significant prison time, though usually with the possibility of parole. Felony murder can carry equally severe penalties, especially if the underlying felony involved violence. These punishments underscore the gravity of taking a life and aim to deter future offenses. Rape is a severe violation involving non-consensual sexual intercourse, often executed through force, threats, coercion, or when the victim is incapacitated. Recognized universally as a grave offense, it infringes upon the victim's autonomy and physical integrity. Legal definitions of rape vary by jurisdiction but typically emphasize the absence of consent. What are the rape types? Rape can take many forms, including acquaintance rape, spousal or marital rape, and statutory rape. Acquaintance rape involves perpetrators known to the victim, such as friends or co-workers. Marital rape, though historically not criminalized in some areas, is now widely recognized as unlawful, recognizing that marriage does not negate the requirement for consent. Statutory rape refers to sexual activity with a minor who cannot legally give consent due to age, even if they verbally consent. Aggravating factors. Certain elements, when present, classify rape as aggravated, which leads to harsher sentencing. Aggravating factors include the use of a weapon, substantial physical injury to the victim, multiple perpetrators, gang rape. Manslaughter is the unlawful killing of another person without malice or premeditation, making it a less severe crime than murder. It generally involves a killing that occurs due to recklessness, impulsivity, or provocation, where the perpetrator did not intend to take a life but acted in a way that led to death. Voluntary manslaughter, this occurs when a person kills another in the heat of passion, usually after being provoked. The provocation is something that might cause a reasonable person to lose control and act impulsively. Common examples include finding a spouse in an affair or being physically attacked. While the act of killing is intentional, it is not premeditated, which makes it distinct from murder. The emotional state at the time of the crime reduces the level of culpability compared to planned murder. Involuntary manslaughter, this is the unintentional killing of another person, resulting from reckless or negligent behavior. The perpetrator may not have intended to harm the victim but acted in a way that was dangerously careless, leading to death. Examples include a fatal car accident caused by drunk driving or an unintentional discharge of a weapon that kills someone. Involuntary manslaughter often involves actions that pose a high risk of harm but lack the intent to cause death. Penalties for manslaughter depend on whether the crime is classified as voluntary or involuntary and the specific circumstances of the case. Voluntary manslaughter typically results in prison sentences ranging from a few years to several decades. as it involves intentional harm, albeit without prior planning. Involuntary manslaughter carries lighter penalties, but the sentence can still range from a few years to decades, particularly if extreme recklessness or neglect led to the death. Courts weigh the severity of the offense with the aim of punishing those responsible while considering the lack of malice. Definition: aggravated assault is an attack intended to cause serious bodily harm, often involving a weapon or an intent to inflict severe injury. It is a more serious offense than simple assault due to the level of harm and the presence of deadly instruments. Examples of this offense includes actions like assault with a deadly weapon, e.g., firearms, knives, or violent attacks causing lasting injury. Penalties vary widely, with sentences ranging from several years to life in prison. Sentences are often harsher if the assault is committed against vulnerable individuals or results in significant harm. Kidnapping is the unlawful taking and holding of a person against their will, typically using force, threat of force, or coercion. The crime involves depriving a victim of their freedom of movement, often with the intent to cause harm, extract ransom, or use the person for some form of leverage or exploitation. Kidnapping can occur in a variety of situations, including abductions for ransom, human trafficking, or as part of a violent crime. Several factors can make kidnapping more severe and increase the penalties associated with the crime. One of the most significant aggravating factors is the involvement of a minor as the victim. Kidnapping children is treated with extreme seriousness due to the inherent vulnerability of minors and the long-lasting psychological impact on victims. A ransom demand during the kidnapping also elevates the crime, as it suggests financial gain is the primary motivation and may indicate an organized criminal effort. Additionally, if there is intent to harm the victim, whether through physical violence, coercion, or threat of death, the crime becomes even more egregious. These aggravating factors not only increase the severity of the crime, but also the likelihood of a more severe punishment. Kidnapping carries severe penalties due to the high risk of harm to the victim and the violation of personal freedom. Sentences for kidnapping typically range from 20 years to life imprisonment, particularly in cases where the victim is a minor, there is a ransom demand, or harm is intended. If the crime crosses state lines or involves federal jurisdiction, such as in the case of interstate kidnapping or abductions involving minors, penalties can be even harsher, with federal charges carrying extended sentences. In some jurisdictions, kidnapping may result in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, reflecting the serious nature of this crime and the need to protect the public from such violent offenses. Armed robbery is a serious offense involving theft where the perpetrator uses a weapon or threats of violence to forcefully take valuables from a victim. It is a highly dangerous crime due to the presence of weapons and the physical threat posed to individuals involved. Aggravating factors that increase the severity of an armed robbery charge include the use of firearms, causing physical harm to victims, or targeting vulnerable individuals. These elements intensify the crime's violent nature and can lead to more severe sentencing. Penalties: armed robbery is punishable by significant prison terms due to its violent nature. Sentences typically range from 10 years to life imprisonment, with harsher consequences in cases involving serious injury, repeat offenses, or high levels of threat.
Now, Ellie, remember, this is our special secret.
Definition: child molestation is the act of engaging in or attempting sexual acts with a minor, defined as anyone under the legal age of consent. This crime is a severe violation of a child's rights and well-being, causing significant physical and psychological harm. It includes behaviors such as inappropriate touching, sexual exploitation, and other forms of abuse, all of which occur without the minor's ability to consent. Aggravating factors: certain factors can elevate child molestation to aggravated offenses, resulting in harsher penalties. These include the sexual assault of very young children, the use of force, threats, or coercion, and repeat offenses. Offenses involving a position of trust, such as those committed by family members or caregivers, are also treated more severely. These aggravating factors demonstrate greater harm to the victim and increased risk to society, justifying enhanced sentences. Penalties: convictions for child molestation carry severe penalties, including lengthy prison sentences, mandatory sex offender registration, and in extreme cases, life imprisonment. Registration as a sex offender often lasts for life and imposes long-term restrictions on housing, employment, and movement. In cases of aggravated child molestation, offenders typically face even longer sentences, with limited opportunities for parole. These measures aim to protect society and deter repeat offenses. Sentencing and parole: child molestation is one of the most strictly punished crimes under U.S. law, with many states imposing mandatory minimum sentences. For particularly heinous offenses, parole may be denied, ensuring that offenders serve long portions of their sentences, or targeting especially vulnerable victims, such as minors or disabled individuals. These factors increase the crime's gravity by introducing greater physical, psychological, or emotional harm. Penalties for rape vary significantly by state and jurisdiction, but generally entail severe consequences, including extended prison sentences, life imprisonment, or, in some jurisdictions, capital punishment. Convicted offenders are often required to register as sex offenders, a designation that may be lifelong. Registration as a sex offender limits the individual's access to housing, employment, and other societal opportunities, providing a safeguard for communities while reinforcing deterrence. These penalties seek justice for victims, aim to rehabilitate offenders, and promote broader societal safety. Securing parole is a process that requires extensive preparation, self-awareness, and the demonstration of personal change. Understanding the parole process and presenting a clear, organized plan is essential. Here's a detailed breakdown of each step and the actions required to increase the likelihood of success in a parole hearing. Before starting the parole application, it's crucial to understand the basic eligibility criteria, which vary based on the legal system, type of conviction, sentence, and parole board regulations. Check parole eligibility date. Determine when you're eligible for parole by consulting with an attorney or reviewing the terms of your sentence. This date is influenced by state or federal laws, the nature of the conviction, and any prior criminal record. Mandatory parole. This type of parole is granted automatically after an individual serves a specified portion of their sentence. It's typically mandated by law, and a hearing may not be required. Discretionary parole. This type requires a formal review by a parole board, which evaluates factors like behavior during incarceration, rehabilitative efforts, and readiness to reintegrate. A discretionary hearing is an opportunity to present the case for release. Good preparation can influence the parole board's decision, as they prioritize individuals who show personal growth and accountability. Good behavior and rehabilitation. Establishing a track record of positive behavior, avoiding disciplinary infractions, and actively participating in rehabilitative programs convey a genuine commitment to improvement. Educational and vocational training. Completing courses or programs, especially those that enhance employability, demonstrates the readiness to reintegrate. Job skills and education contribute to personal development and can show a future-oriented mindset. Counseling and therapy. Addressing personal issues, such as addiction or anger, through therapy signals a commitment to self-improvement. Participation in mental health or substance abuse counseling, anger management, or other relevant programs illustrates steps toward behavioral changes. A parole plan outlines the steps an individual will take to reintegrate into society successfully. A well-constructed plan shows the parole board that the applicant has thought seriously about the future.
I would ask that you sentence this defendant to the maximum amount of time allowed by law. He has been involved in a number of offenses involving guns, drug trafficking, high-speed chases with the police. He has no regard for society.
I was doing good, Your Honor. I really was. Your Honor, I was doing good out there. I was not selling drugs. I was doing better than that. I was trying to get my life on track, man. And this man just told me you're trying to give me 13 years. I'm not a monster. I'm not a monster. I'm telling you,
Who was driving that car the other day when the police were chasing you?
I was driving.
Well, I think I've had plenty of time to observe how you would behave after you left prison. I hung significant prison time over your head because the 8 cases you had in this courtroom showed to me that you were a potential menace to society.
Developing a release plan. This includes plans for housing, employment, and support networks. It also addresses how the applicant intends to continue any necessary rehabilitation. Housing arrangements. Securing a stable living situation is critical. Options include living with family, staying with friends, or residing in a halfway house. Stability in housing provides a foundation for other areas of life. Employment or financial plan. Developing a plan for income post-release is essential. Ideally, this means securing a job in advance, but having a strategy for finding employment shows the board a readiness to become financially independent. Support network. A strong support network can make a difference in parole outcomes. Family, friends, community support, and letters from these individuals indicate a foundation of accountability and stability. A personal statement allows the applicant to express their accountability and personal growth directly to the parole board. Acknowledging responsibility, accepting responsibility for past actions, and showing genuine remorse are crucial elements of the statement. Parole boards are looking for evidence that the applicant understands the impact of their behavior on others. Showing insight and personal growth reflection on the factors that contributed to past mistakes, along with concrete steps taken to change, provides insight into how the applicant has grown during incarceration. Expressing future goals, a clear vision of future goals helps show direction. These can include plans to work, reunite with family, or volunteer, all of which convey positive intentions for reintegration. Supporting documents provide tangible proof of the individual's efforts toward improvement, support network, and preparedness for release. Letters of support, letters from family, friends, clergy, or potential employers can emphasize character, commitment to positive change, and the strength of their support network. Certificates and records, records of completed rehabilitation programs, certificates from vocational training, or positive behavior awards demonstrate a commitment to personal development and readiness for reintegration. Medical and psychological evaluations, evaluations from health professionals can be valuable, particularly if they confirm progress or treatment for underlying issues such as addiction or mental health concerns. Such documents can lend credibility to an applicant's rehabilitation efforts. Preparation for the hearing includes both mental and logistical preparation. Presenting oneself professionally and anticipating questions can help make a favorable impression on the parole board. Presenting oneself professionally, appropriate attire, respectful language, and a serious demeanor communicate readiness and respect for the process. Practicing possible questions. Common questions might include: what have you learned from this experience? How will you avoid similar situations in the future? And what are your plans post-release? Preparing thoughtful answers in advance helps with confidence and clarity. Remaining positive and respectful. The tone during the hearing should remain respectful and positive.
You are here under the charge of perjury and making false statements.
Yes.
And we'll come to the details of that in a moment. But why might it be important to tell the truth?
Because being honest is the best thing to do. Because if you're not, other actions happen, and being able to tell the truth takes a lot of weight off of you, and it's better to tell the truth and be honest so that everything else can come to light.
So by not telling the truth to the grand jury investigation, what do you think happened? Or didn't happen?
What didn't happen was I didn't tell the truth about where I was during that time. And
the parole hearing is an opportunity to communicate directly with the parole board and convey the applicant's readiness for release. Answering questions directly, clear, honest answers are more effective than lengthy or vague responses. If clarification is needed, it's okay to ask. Expressing remorse and empathy, demonstrating remorse for the offense and empathy for any affected parties indicates maturity. Showing empathy and a commitment to avoid similar actions in the future is beneficial. Detailing future plans, emphasizing a structured release plan, support network, and strategies for reintegration are important. Specificity in these areas shows a readiness to reenter society responsibly. In the event of a parole denial, understanding the reasons and addressing any areas of concern is vital for future applications. Understanding reasons for denial, reviewing any given reasons can help identify areas that require improvement, such as the need for further rehabilitation or a more detailed release plan.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I can't say sorry enough. And what I did was so wrong. It was so wrong. And I will deal with that for the rest of my life as well. I cannot even put myself in your guys' family position. As I've tried so many times, it's so impossible. It's so impossible. And my heart hurts for you and your family so much.
Preparing for future hearings. If eligible for future parole consideration, taking additional steps to address the board's concerns can strengthen the case. Legal assistance in cases where the denial seems unfair or based on misunderstandings, an attorney can provide guidance on possible appeals or strategies for the next hearing. If granted parole, it's important to understand and comply with all conditions imposed by the parole board. Complying with parole conditions may include regular check-ins, drug testing, attending counseling, and adhering to curfews or geographic restrictions. Compliance is crucial to maintaining parole status. Demonstrating a commitment to stay out of trouble following all conditions consistently reinforces a commitment to rehabilitation and to avoiding further legal issues. Using support services, parolees often have access to resources like job training, counseling, and community programs. Taking advantage of these services can assist in the reintegration process. Securing parole involves a combination of preparation, accountability, and a clear plan for re-entry into society. Each step, from understanding eligibility to building a comprehensive parole plan, contributes to making a compelling case for release. The parole board's decision hinges on an applicant's ability to demonstrate genuine change, responsibility for past actions, and readiness for a positive future. By following these steps and preparing thoroughly, applicants can increase their chances of success in the parole process, ultimately working towards a constructive and law-abiding life. The Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides foundational protections for individuals against government power in criminal and civil proceedings, playing a crucial role in shaping U.S. justice. Here's an in-depth look at each of its key clauses. Grand jury clause. This clause establishes that in serious federal criminal cases, specifically felonies, the government cannot bring charges without first presenting its evidence to a grand jury. Composed of ordinary citizens, the grand jury reviews the prosecutor's evidence to determine if there is probable cause to believe the accused committed the crime. If the grand jury agrees, it issues an indictment, formally charging the individual and allowing the case to move forward in court. By involving citizens in this initial stage, the grand jury acts as a check against unwarranted prosecutions. The grand jury process is exclusive to federal cases, but many states have implemented similar procedures. However, exceptions exist for active duty military personnel or in cases of wartime conduct, where military courts operate under a separate judicial system that doesn't require a grand jury. The Double Jeopardy Clause. The Double Jeopardy Clause is one of the most widely recognized legal protections, prohibiting multiple prosecutions or punishments for the same offense within the same jurisdiction. Once a defendant has been acquitted, found not guilty, or convicted, the government cannot try the individual again for the same crime, even if new evidence later emerges. This protection ensures finality, providing peace of mind to those involved and preventing the government from continually prosecuting someone in hopes of obtaining a different verdict. This principle covers two primary areas. The government cannot keep prosecuting a person for the same crime once a verdict has been reached, protecting against repeated or harassing trials. It also restricts the government from imposing multiple punishments for the same offense. However, double jeopardy does not apply across separate jurisdictions. This is known as dual sovereignty, a principle allowing both state and federal governments to prosecute someone if the same act violates both their laws. For example, an individual could face both federal and state charges for a single criminal act, especially if it crosses state lines or involves federal interests. This exception has sparked debate over potential loopholes in double jeopardy protections, but the courts maintain that different jurisdictions represent distinct legal entities. Self-incrimination clause. Often recognized as the right to remain silent, this clause protects individuals from being compelled to provide testimony that could be self-incriminating.
When she has to make that choice, what do you say to her? On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
You were quoted as saying on Fox 5 in New York, you were quoted as saying, if you raise prices and you don't take that cash and put it back into research, I think it's despicable. I think you should not be in the drug business. We take all of our cash, all of our extra profit, and spend it on research for these patients, for other patients who have terrible life-threatening, life-ending diseases. Did you say that?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Do you think you've done anything wrong?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
I'd like to yield time to Congressman Gowdy of South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it pronounced Shkreli?
Yes, sir.
See, there you can answer some questions. That one didn't incriminate you. I just want to make sure you understand, you are welcome to answer questions, and not all of your answers are going to subject you to incrimination. You understand that, don't you?
I intend to follow the advice of my counsel, not yours.
I just want to make sure you're getting the right advice. You do know that not every disclosure can be subject to the Fifth Amendment.
Rooted in centuries-old common law principles, it ensures fairness in the legal process and guards against coercive government tactics. If a person believes that answering a question could incriminate them, they can invoke this right and refuse to respond. This protection is fundamental in criminal proceedings, as it ensures that defendants are not forced into confessing or providing evidence against themselves. The self-incrimination clause is also the basis for Miranda rights, a set of protections introduced in the landmark Supreme Court case Miranda v. Arizona 1966. According to Miranda rights, police must inform suspects in custody of their rights to remain silent and to consult an attorney before any questioning begins. This ensures that individuals understand their right to avoid self-incrimination and have access to legal representation. However, the right against self-incrimination applies only to verbal or testimonial evidence. It does not cover physical evidence like fingerprints, DNA, or other bodily samples, which authorities may require as part of an investigation.
I once asked, if you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment? I was asking that question. Now I know the answer to that question. When your family, your company, and all the people in your orbit have become the targets of an unfounded, politically motivated witch hunt, supported by lawyers, prosecutors, and even the fake news media, you really have no choice. We cannot permit a renegade and out-of-control prosecutor to use this investigation as a means of advancing her political career. New York deserves better, and this country deserves better. This is a vindictive and self-serving fishing expedition, the likes of which this country has perhaps never seen before. If there was any question in my mind,
Due Process Clause. Considered one of the most important protections within the Constitution, the Due Process Clause prohibits the government from depriving individuals of life, liberty, or property without fair procedures. Due process serves as a safeguard against arbitrary or unfair government actions, ensuring that any deprivation of rights follows established legal protocols. This clause has two primary interpretations. Procedural due process. This interpretation requires the government to provide fair procedures before depriving someone of rights, including advance notice, a fair hearing, and an impartial tribunal. Substantive due process. Expanding on procedural due process, substantive due process protects certain fundamental rights from government interference, even if proper procedures are followed. Substantive due process has been interpreted by courts to include rights that are not explicitly listed in the Constitution, such as privacy and personal autonomy. This broader reading has significantly influenced cases involving marriage, family life, and individual freedoms. The Due Process Clause has been invoked in countless Supreme Court cases to challenge laws deemed unjust, overly restrictive, or arbitrary. Its scope is vast, impacting everything from property rights to criminal justice and personal freedoms. Takings Clause. Eminent domain. The Takings Clause prevents the government from seizing private property for public use without providing fair compensation, a concept known as eminent domain. It requires the government to pay property owners the fair market value of any property taken to ensure they are not financially harmed. Eminent domain is only justified when the property is taken for public use, traditionally including projects like roads, schools, and parks. However, the definition of public use has broadened over time. In the controversial case Kello v. City of New London, 2005, the Supreme Court ruled that the government could seize private property to transfer it to another private party if the project would serve a public purpose, like generating jobs or increasing tax revenue. This decision, which allowed private development projects to qualify as public use, stirred significant public debate and led many states to enact stricter eminent domain regulations. The protections provided by the Fifth Amendment have led to several landmark Supreme Court cases that continue to shape the rights of individuals in the U.S. legal system. Some of the most influential cases include Miranda v. Arizona 1966. This case established the requirement for law enforcement to inform suspects of their rights to remain silent and to have an attorney, ensuring they are aware of their self-incrimination protections under the Self-Incrimination Clause. Kello v. City of New London 2005. Involving the Takings Clause, this case redefined public use to include public purpose projects like private development intended to benefit the community, sparking debates over property rights and leading to reform in several states. Malloy v. Hogan 1964. This case extended the Fifth Amendment's self-incrimination clause to the states, ensuring that its protections are applied at both federal and state levels. This incorporation of the clause underscores the Fifth Amendment's significance in safeguarding rights across the country. Together, these cases illustrate the Fifth Amendment's extensive impact on U.S. constitutional law, offering a protective shield for individuals against governmental abuse while setting parameters for state and federal authority. These landmark decisions have redefined police procedures, the limits of government power and property seizures, and the protections individuals enjoy in both federal and state cases. They reflect the amendment's adaptability in addressing modern legal challenges and balancing government interests with fundamental rights. Through these protections, the Fifth Amendment serves as a cornerstone of American justice. Its clauses work together to uphold the principles of fairness, accountability, and individual autonomy within the legal system. The amendment's reach extends beyond criminal cases to influence civil rights, property laws, and procedural fairness, ensuring that the justice system respects personal freedoms while maintaining order. As new legal challenges emerge, the Fifth Amendment remains a critical part of the U.S. Constitution, continuing to adapt to evolving interpretations and reaffirming its role in protecting individual rights against government overreach.